Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective podcast. I am your host, Anthony Grasso. We are joined today by Amanda Kimball, who is the Director of Holistic and Reintegrative Sport Performance at the University of Connecticut in Storrs, Connecticut. She also works with women's soccer and men's golf. She's got an extensive experience in the world of strength and conditioning. Just to go back to give you some of her credentials, she has a bachelor's in science from the University of Southern Maine, where she played basketball. We have a master's in education from Springfield. And just to name some of the places that she's occupied, she's been at Harvard, Florida State, CJ at Springfield, and she's been at UConn for quite some time. And I'll let her kind of take us through that with football, field hockey, lacrosse, rowing, softball, volleyball, and then obviously basketball. She is a certified strength and conditioning coach, and she also has her LMT, which is a licensed massage therapist. I know I was going to mess up one of them. So there we go. Massage therapist. So Amanda, welcome. We are super grateful to have you on the podcast. And obviously I know you kind of hopped on last minute. Everybody's super busy this time of year, so we really appreciate having you. What I'm going to allow you to do is just kind of take us through the story. Like, where did this whole thing start? How did you get going? And give us any sort of insight that you want to let us know about prior to us starting this conversation up.
Sure. Thanks again for asking me to do this.
Yeah.
Happy to help you out. But yeah, so, he gave kind of a brief background. So I grew up in Maine, one of 5 siblings, crazy, on a farm, working farm,
Sick.
crazy.
I'm one of 5 too. I didn't know you were one of 5.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare. Where are you falling? Because I'm the oldest of 5. Where are you?
Oh, I'm third. So I'm the second. Well, I'm fourth, second to youngest.
Oh,
yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you're not like true middle.
No, I'm not. I'm not true middle.
Okay, good.
Well, I don't want those issues, right? No.
Yeah, I don't need those. Yeah. Hopefully my brother Brian's not listening right now.
Yeah. But yeah, so we all played sports growing up. My older siblings played like field hockey, whatever, fall sports. My mom was like, nope, you're not playing a fall sport. I can't get you there. It's crazy. Yeah. So instead I went to the YMCA in the fall, and then I played basketball and softball. And that's when I started weightlifting, was like when I was younger.
Wow.
Because I needed something to do. So I just go to the YMCA and, mess around when I was younger. Nice. And, at first I was like, man, I can't believe she won't let me play soccer, and then now I'm grateful that, she ended up, putting her foot down and not wanting to drive me anywhere.
Yeah. I guess it's a good way to develop a strength coach for anybody who's looking to develop a young strength and conditioning specialist. We're just going to, no sports. You're just going to hang out in the weight room. All right. Come back.
Yeah. Hang out in the weight room. And then I can only let you do 2 other sports because I can't drive you there. But yeah. So then, being from Maine, I ended up, doing undergrad in Maine, as many of my siblings did as well. And then ventured out to the faraway land of Massachusetts. Got a grad assistant ship there. Again, this was 20 years ago, and things have changed obviously from then till now. And had a great experience there. From there, we had to do obviously a couple internships. So was at Harvard. Did my big one at Florida State. Lived down there for the summer. In Tallahassee.
Completely different from Maine.
Oh yeah, completely. Yep. Yeah. Just to get some different experiences. And then when I was in Florida for that summer, I was like, I don't know, I like New England.
Really?
Because I was in Tallahassee in the summer, and I'm a kid from Maine.
Right.
It was kind of like I was definitely out of my element.
Yeah.
And everything about Florida State and working and interning there was great, but just I wanted to get back up north. And so, of course you're applying for jobs, and Coach Martin, graciously, looked at my resume and brought me on campus and got hired about 18 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I can't believe it. I mean, no one goes to a job and it's like, oh, I'm going to be here forever, but it just turned out to be that way for me anyways, right now.
Yeah. No, that's all. And you're referring to Jerry Martin, obviously, for all those who are not aware, legendary UConn strength and conditioning coach. I don't even want to just slot him as a football strength and conditioning coach, because he was obviously well involved in all aspects of that community. And so, it's super, super nice to be able to actually have access to him. You know what I mean? Obviously, all of you guys who kind of came up under him and got your, so that was 18 years ago. And so, we want to kind of take us through some of the time you've been at UConn and how that all kind of transferred through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, back then, I don't know, I can't remember now, but I think there was only like 4 or 5 of us on staff, the whole staff.
Yeah.
So when you get hired, everybody works football. I think we only had, the field house weight room and the basketball weight room.
Right.
So everybody mainly worked out of the field house.
Mm.
So we all worked football, and that was, as you know, a job within itself. And then we all had like 3 or 4 teams.
Right.
So it was cool. What's different about today is the fact that we all are like, 1 or 2 teams, maybe we kind of specialize a little bit more.
Sure.
We are able to do warm-ups. We're able to go out and do conditioning and whatever else on the field and do weightlifting. We're able to get involved in the whole process. But back then it was like weight room first. If you have time, you can go out in the field, do a warm-up or whatever, But yeah, so what was great about it was we were all in basically one spot.
Yeah.
There was all of us in the weight room. We'd work out together, we'd collaborate, we would, it was, and maybe I'm just being nostalgic and maybe it wasn't all that great, but I remember it just being like, this is really good that I can turn to my right and get an opinion from somebody and turn to my left and get another opinion from somebody else. Completely
Yeah.
different. And now, in the way the world is, everyone's so spread out.
Mm.
It's easier to probably do a Zoom with one of my colleagues at work than it is to actually walk across the campus.
To actually talk to him. Yeah, exactly. Right. You got like 17 different weight rooms. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think if I remember correctly, when I was hired, I had softball. That was one of my teams. I had women's rowing. I think I had lacrosse back then, and then I think I was maybe in 1 or 2 years. And then I switched over to working with women's basketball. And I've been with them up until last year. Well, 9 months ago.
Yeah.
And then even when, excuse me, even when I had basketball back 15 years ago, when it started, you still had other teams.
I was gonna ask. So yeah, like when you started with women's basketball, and obviously this goes back to, is it 2006? I think, is it?
Yeah, probably 6, 7.
Yeah, math correct. Yeah. So 2006 to 2020, when that started, so you're working with other teams at the same time, right? And that's kind of when, like, where was UConn women's basketball at that particular point? Because obviously we know the juggernaut that they became and are today, but what was it like then, and kind of how
back when I started with them, we haven't missed a Final Four, so they were already up there. We just had to keep them up there. But yeah, so I mean, but back then it was like, there wasn't you didn't have to travel, you didn't have to go out to practice, you didn't even have to warm them up half the time. It was literally like when you first started with at least at UConn, it was you lifted twice a week for half an hour, so you could have other teams. Sure. And then it's evolved into where it is now.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's happened obviously to more than just the basketball world. It's football now, and in a lot more sports, obviously.
Yeah. And so it seems like, just judging by the tone of your voice and obviously some of the things that you've reminisced on, I think there's part of you that understands why it's moved in the direction of a little bit more of a specialized case. But I think part of you also understand the value that you were able to get by having exposure to all these different teams. And obviously at that time, like, you're working with women's basketball, who is, like we talked about, they're a very, prolific basketball team, right? Everybody kind of knows about them, right? But then it's like, all right, but I also have, a chance to work with all these other sports that could potentially, refine my skills when I do go and coach basketball or whatever the case is. So it seems like you're kind of like on the fence as to like whether you like the new current model or if it's like, probably shouldn't be. Do you think it could get a little bit dangerous or be at a disadvantage to some of the athletes and some of the value they can provide, or maybe even some of the coaches by doing some of this, specialization?
I don't know. I mean, again, as long as you keep your head about it, don't get too, the coaches are hired to do their job,
Yeah.
They're an expert at what they do, and we're an expert at what we do, Sure. So it's kind of like, when I say specialize, I mean more like maybe I shouldn't have said specialize, I'm just more involved.
Sure.
Like, I'm around, I want to be around. I want to be able to communicate with the people I'm working with. I want to know what's going on. I want to know, and I mean, we have technology now. We have to be able to use it, and it gives us more information. So, I think that back then we were able to do that because it was much simpler times. Now we have, we've added on force plates and GPS, and we're tracking all these things. And now we actually have to, analyze it and understand it. So whereas if we were doing all that back then, there's no way you could do that job and have 4 or 5 teams.
Sure. Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So it's just like
Um,
there's a little bit more, obviously there's more to take into account. There's more information that you can gather. And then obviously, yeah, it's like, well, as long as you have the power to, because ultimately it's like if you don't, and you're working with a bunch of other teams and you have all this data and you have all this information coming in, whether it's like internal, external metrics,
yeah,
whatever it
whatever.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, at some point it's like, well, this isn't as valuable as it could be because I just can't dedicate the time to actually gain information or gain some sort
Right.
of story behind it. Yeah. Okay. That
Exactly.
makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's not easy stuff to learn, and it's probably even more difficult to try to take that information and portray it to your coaches in a way that they
Sure.
understand.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
So it's
sense.
actually useful, and like you're working together, not against each other.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, I think that this is interesting because, and it kind of goes back to, what you said earlier, where it's like it might be easier for you to actually get on a Zoom call with one of your colleagues and then talk to them, right? Given the amount of, whether, and that's not the case at every university, obviously. Like there's some who are experiencing some of the things that you got to experience. And I think it's funny. I don't know where I heard this. I think it was on another podcast, but someone was like, hey, yeah, like, it seems like every parent that has come before, like with my parents and, their parents, which were my grandparents, right? Everybody tries to make it so that their kids have what they didn't have kind of situation, right? And so it's almost seems like that's happening a little bit in strength and conditioning, where it's like, all right, every single time there's like a new wave of strength coaches or whatever, it's like we want to be able to provide them with what we weren't able to have. But at the same time, and then this is kind of going back to what I heard, and I hope I don't butcher this, but he was basically like, but our parents still wanted to give us what they did have, right? Which is some of that struggle and some of the
Right.
things that you need to obviously go through and some of that turmoil to try to overcome problems. Because I think that's really what happens, right? When it comes to like getting better at your craft, is like, you're not thinking and trying to strategize and problem solve if there is no problem, right? So like
Right.
as soon as problems happen, that's when the thinking turns on and we're like, all right, let's provide some sort of, solution to this, right? But if there's no problem and everything is just kind of like, all right, cool.
Yep.
It's like, how much thinking are you actually doing? And I think, then it gets into like thinking and how, I think about thinking in terms of like knowledge creation, so I think that's what's good for young strength and conditioning coaches, to have that exposure to a variety of different teams and a variety of different problems and what. So, and in your instance, you're saying it's like, yeah, I have a lot of like contact. I think we have a lot of contact with people in the strength and conditioning community, and we have like more like, yeah, I guess like contact is where like we have more contact. We have ability to get in contact with people,
Yes.
right? Through like social media or whatever the case is. And like, Zoom, or we're like our access to people, I think has changed a little bit though. It's like, all right, well, like we don't have as much connection as we would have. We have contact,
Absolutely.
but we don't have connection. Right. And I think
Yeah.
that's the difference too. And I think that's a little bit of the danger that we get into when it comes to like young strength and conditioning coaches understanding like how to, and this literally just goes back to a podcast I did last night with Sean Conity over at he's Oregon State now, men's basketball. And he was saying the same things, like we need to be able to have the skills to like talk to different types of people and different ranges of, different walks of life, and whether that be in the world of sport performance or just life in general. And right now I feel like there's a little bit of a single-sided approach to that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with all that. And back to when you were, talking about like being able to get out of a challenge, like, and that's the thing. And as a parent,
Yeah.
not in I even see it with our athletes that are 18 to 22-year-olds, it's like you want to provide them with everything. You want to make everything, you want to fix everything for them. But you know what? Sometimes it's best not to, just because you want to see how they handle it. Are they gonna, that's probably the biggest learning thing my days. Cause I feel like some of these people that are my kids, athletes I work with, they can't fight their way out of a paper bag,
Right.
just because everyone's done everything for them. And it's not that, I don't want to help them, but sometimes it's more like, let's look at the big picture here. What are you going to learn from this? If I just give this to you,
Yeah. And I think that's, that's something I always joke around, because like my parents, like, old school, like from Italy, like, well, my mom is, and my dad, obviously like typical, like, just American dad, like trying to, blue collar guy. Right. So it's like they wanted to do everything they could to provide more for me. So that and I always say it, I'm like, yeah, I try every day to be more like my parents, but I'll never be as tough as they are. Like they're just built different. You know what I mean? There's just this, like this rigor that they have when it comes to just like attacking certain things. I'm like, and I try to do that, you know what I mean? But I don't know, maybe they're just better at like not showing any sort of like weakness when it comes to it. Whereas in my mind, I think I'm like, oh, like am I showing weakness right now? Like I need to like attack. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. Like
Don't show weakness.
Yeah, right. It's like, okay, I gotta
God, don't be vulnerable. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's the worst thing ever, right?
Yeah, right. It's like, especially like being the oldest of 5 boys, it's like I think,
Yeah.
all the times I'm always like, I have to like be like, put this display of like fortitude, right? Like
You gotta set the
formidable.
example.
Yeah, right. So the example kind of thing. But no, I think that that was something, and we don't have to get too deep, but that was something that like working within strength and conditioning and some of the experience that I had in football, I was like, well, I would go home and like in my mind, I'm like, all right, like I'm 30, 31 years old. I come across to my younger brothers and like some of the people I'm surrounded by as somebody who's like created a career for himself and created like, established himself, worked hard, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, like I'm thinking about the things that are happening in my job, in my craft that like completely compromise the integrity of the subject matter and the things that I thought I was supposed to be good at in order to actually gain access to this industry. Right. And so they're like, yeah, like it's so cool. And like we see you on the sidelines and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah. And then I'm thinking back to like something that happened earlier in the week where there was just like, I'm like 31 years old getting like yelled at by another grown man for like, standing on the sideline the wrong way or something. You know what I mean? I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't know.
Smoke and mirrors a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm like, I don't think I'm as cool as my brothers think I am. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't think I'm, so
that's what it is.
But I think, like going back to that quote now, it's like, I think it's like, parents and obviously people who've come before us in this industry try to do so much to give us what we didn't have, but they forget to give us what they did have, like, and that is that struggle and that ability to overcome complications. And so if we could just kind of go back to some of the early to middle stages of your time with UConn basketball, and obviously sticking with the theme of problem solving. And, I think what's interesting is like the first time I met you and like talked to you, in my mind, it was like, I'm talking to somebody who, and this is just my perspective. I'm a weird thinker. I don't know. I think weird stuff sometimes. Okay. But like first time talking to you, it's like, okay. Like I know you've like worked with UConn basketball for quite some time, women's basketball. And I know that you were a strength coach with them through, a long period of time and much more. Right. Mm-hmm. But in my mind, I wasn't like, I understand kind of, at least at that time, I had a pretty decent perspective of what the strength conditioning craft consisted of. It's like, I get it. Like, like there's training involved and something, but I was kind of like moving past some of that training stuff and just looking at more at like what kind of experience and value you're providing to the student athlete. So I wasn't so much like enthralled with like the training and some of the like content and things that the work that you've done, but more so focused on like, wow, I'm talking to somebody right now who has been through some challenges when it comes to like navigating a bunch of student athletes who are operating at an extremely high level. I mean, let's be honest, like if you want to go to the WNBA, like a lot of these females are going to go to UConn. Yeah, like it's like it's a good gateway, right? To say the least. So there's that, and it's like you're navigating the personalities, the relationships, you're navigating Gino, right? You're navigating a ton of different people who obviously have a say in the program because I mean, anybody who's from Connecticut knows like UConn women's basketball is the team here, right? So what were some of those specific challenges, maybe even some of the shortcomings, some of the mistakes, whatever that you kind of came across that you can kind of help some of those younger strength coaches that are taking on larger roles now with teams that are where it's becoming much more than like, and then maybe like someone moving into the professional ranks where it's like, like, okay, cool. Like you're going to provide some like training for our athletes and maybe you'll do some stuff on the nutrition side, whatever the case is, like, this is great. Some GPS, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, we really need you more. Like you're obviously, I'm sure you'll touch on this. You're going to be navigating things that are way beyond the scope of just training. Right. So like, what were some of those things that you kind of came across that you felt like were almost from like an insider perspective, like things that we just don't see on the exterior?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think the training part is probably the easy part of this job. It's the writing the programs, the X's and O's. That's the easy part. It's the relationships that either you have or you don't have, that kind of make or break you, I think, again, and not everybody is in the situation where you, I just think I just messed this up, where you walk into a program where you already have, Hall of Fame coaches and you already have, a couple national championships, you're walking in as I think I was like 25, 26 years old. I was young. I was maybe 26, maybe. And so you're obviously, this is like the best thing ever that's ever happened to you in your life, have the opportunity to work with, a program like this. So a lot of it is just kind of being like, hey, let's look at the big picture here. What can I do to help? Honestly, I don't think many of us got into this profession to be the star of the show. That's not what, be in the background, do what you got to do, work hard, keep your head down, just do what you do. you know, and like for example, Rosemary Regal was our athletic trainer at the time. She's a phenomenal human. And her and I had to work together just to try to put together like a warm up before practice.
Really?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we didn't have that. We didn't have that, you know, 15 years ago.
Really?
You know, it's funny. And now it's like, what, you don't warm up.
So what were they doing for warm up? What was it
they
like?
Go out, run 2 laps, and then they start playing, you know, and
that's amazing.
And maybe a static stretch for a couple minutes, and then go, you know? So it's like starting from like, literally like not having a warm up, lifting 30 minutes twice a week. And at that time we shared Gamble. We didn't have our own practice facility. So we would lift maybe 7, 8 o'clock at night after practice, which is like horrible,
right?
You know, and you're trying to motivate these kids. You're trying to like, you know, and yet they don't see you very often because again, I have like 4 other teams that I'm working with. You know, I'm not at practice. We're not monitoring anything. We're not, you know, so very, very bare bones to evolving it, you know. And for me, it was more of like, hey, what are the big stones that I can try to chip away at, you know? And eventually we got to the point where, you know, traveling, you're involved in every aspect. I mean, obviously not, I'm out of my jurisdiction, out of my lane, if anything with practice or games, whatever. That's not my job. But anything with human performance, was involved in.
Sure.
But so that's kind of like the spectrum where it came from. And I don't know if in your, you know, mind, if you thought that was a fast progression or not. I don't know, you know, because it was like 15 years of like going from literally not utilizing strength and conditioning a whole bunch.
Sure.
You did it just because everyone else did.
Yeah.
You know, to now where it's a huge piece of you know, your program.
Yeah. No, it is fast. Yeah.
Yeah. So back then we had, you know, the biggest chunk of time that I had with them was preseason, because you had a full 6 weeks and you had all 8 hours.
Oh, nice.
You know, and then you had, you know, they'd come for a summer session. Sure. And that was the largest training block she had that wasn't interrupted with any sort of practice.
Sure.
Because it's hard to try to, you know, make these gains and right some wrongs with some of these athletes and fix some things.
Right.
You don't have any time to do it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that in season when season's like 7 months long.
Yeah. Yeah. So you essentially, I mean, just by listening, obviously, it seems like you went in there and you're like, all right, well, I need to kind of revamp the culture and the perspective around training, right? Like they're like the way these people view training and obviously having some sort of physical preparation and just, you know, the idea of like, hey, this needs to be more than just us coming out here and playing basketball. And like you said, maybe some of those big rocks are like, all right, well, I'm going to help you guys put together a warm up before you actually practice. And, you know, something simple as that is like, okay, we're going to actually have some time in the weight room, right? Like maybe like I'm going to actually
maybe even before practice.
Yeah. Crazy. Can't believe you're doing that.
You know, and the thing is like, it's like, you're not just dealing with, you know, if like they have to go to class, you know, perfect world, I'd have them this time, we'd practice, we'd do this, we'd do massages, we'd do all this. A perfect world, that'd be great. But you know what? We have so many other obstacles, you know, so you've got to kind of work around everything. You've got to pay attention. You've got to kind of be a bit of a chameleon, you know, you've got to adapt. And, you know, and at the end of the day, you just don't mess it up.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
You can't mess it up. You gotta be be there, you know?
Well, it's funny because like you say, don't mess it up. And that, you know, you would almost like when people hear that, when I hear that, I'm always like, all right, yeah, that means like you're typically stepping into an operation where it's like, you just don't want to get in the way of the athlete. Like they're probably going to get to where they're going with or without you. Right. But like you can provide some guidance, obviously. And that is the idea. And, you know, some of I think it was Alex Richard I had on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, you know, he's the director of sport performance down at DME. And he was like, yeah, I just, you know, like I'm 5 to 10%. Like I just try not to get in the way, like you said. So now with that, right, like there is some sense of, well, you didn't want to get in the way, but at the same time, you did have to intervene a little bit to like, hey, like we need to change some of the way things are done around here, right? There's probably a little bit more of an old school approach. So what was your like method of kind of like integrating some of your thoughts while also kind of like being respectful and navigating the personalities of these coaches and other players who are about like coming from all different walks of life, have, achieved success in a bunch of other different places. What was that like trying to like navigate the scene of like Gino Auriemma, UConn women's basketball, all these other coaches, players coming from all over, some of the top recruits, right? Like, how did you kind of like, was there like a, in the, look in the mirror moment where like, all right, Amanda, this is how you're going to go about doing this, right? And then you just kind of like set out and like,
No, honestly, I think, I mean, it's always about the players first, So, and I think, trying to create an environment for them where they're coming in here in the weight room or wherever it is, or any experience with me,
Right.
or anything that I'm leading. I think it's one of those things where, they have to understand, why we're doing it, because honestly, in our world, we need to do the things that they hate to do.
Yeah.
They don't like doing the things that they're bad at,
Sure.
so
Yeah.
it's just understanding and educating them. And again, one ear out the other most of the time,
Sure.
but having them understand that I'm doing this because I care, because I want to keep you safe. I want you to be here to play basketball because that's why you came.
Sure.
And go to school.
Yeah.
But like,
please
this
go to
is
class.
why, yeah, we're here. And you know what? You just try to, for me, what works for me is just, keeping it real, like I'm not their mother. I'm not their friend. I'm here to help them do whatever it is they want to do. You know what I mean? And if you're happy with, riding the bench for 4 years, then there's not much I can do about that,
Right.
I would make it the best practice player out there, but that's not the case, typically at UConn. Yeah. So I don't know if that's the appropriate answer, but it's when you walk into a system that's already set in place in stone, you try to look for opportunities, where you can make it better. Like for example, when you're on the road, there might be an hour or so where, because I'm a massage therapist, so I would work on these guys all the time.
Sure.
And you look for opportunities where, hey, there's some downtime. Let's go. Let's work on that for you.
Sure.
It's just kind of, you got to be on your toes, because the schedule's not going to change.
Sure.
No one's going to put in, hey, massage therapy time. You just have to work with the athletes, work with the athletic trainers, work with people and make it happen because that's what you got to do. In my experience, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go up to Gino and be like, hey, you need to change the schedule.
Right.
Yeah. That's not how it works.
How would that have gone over?
Yeah. I don't know.
You don't know because you never tried. Never.
No. I know my boundaries. That's for sure. But
that is a great answer, and I think that's really interesting. And to go back to what you talked about, earlier was the idea that like, I'm not your mother, I'm not your friend, I'm here, I'm someone who's going to provide an experience for you to guide you in the direction and have a little bit of an impact on you in the 4 years, if that I'll be able to get to know you. I guess like one thing I thought about last night, and I was kind of like, you know what, I think it would be interesting to talk a little bit about some of the specific considerations that you think people should be aware of when it comes to working with female athletes, right? So obviously you're working not just with female athletes, but female basketball players who are arguably, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're arguably the best at their craft coming out of high school. Like most of these females coming out of high school, going to UConn, right? Like, I don't know, like,
can't walk and chew gum, but
right. I'm assuming most division. It's so funny because like I always tell my brothers, they're like, yeah, dude, like they see these like Division I athletes like playing in the national championship or whatever. Like whenever I interned out in Alabama, and it was like, you watch like the national championship game later that year, and my brothers are like, man, dude, like these kids are crazy. And I'm like, yeah, you realize like I had to tell that dude to like tie his shoes most of the time. You know what I mean? Like things like that. They're just like, well, I'm like, yeah, it's like kids, So I guess like going with that, it's like you have, these, if is there anything that you thought of, in that moment where you were like, okay, I'm going to have to attack this from a different role, not even just like physically, but just like some considerations, like psychologically, is like what it's like for, a girl who's been, or a woman who's been recruited to come to this high level program but is also still like just a freshman in college and going through the same experiences like anybody else is in. I don't know if you're a freshman year in college, like mine was a disaster. I was like, what? Yeah, exactly.
I could go back and do it again.
I don't even know if it's possible to get a GPA as low as I had. I mean, I was just like unbelievable. Like, yeah, it's like, what? Dude, like, is that possible? Like one of my buddies is on the soccer team, and I think his GPA was actually lower than mine because he like literally never went to class. But he was like, dude, yeah, I'm not sure if it's gonna work out for me. I was like, yeah, I don't know either, man. I was like thinking about going to like trade school or something like that, or being an electrician or something like that. I was like, I don't know if this college thing is for me. So yeah, like obviously ended up working out a little bit, I guess. But yeah. So what are some of those considerations that you kind of maybe came across and maybe you didn't know at the time, and then you started to realize like after working with the team for a little while?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things where you can't have, if you have a team of 12, you're not going to have 12 All-Americans because no one's going to play. You know what I mean? People are going to be unhappy, So, knowing that you obviously have a few superstars on your roster and a few that aren't, are basically the glue that holds the team together, but whether doesn't matter who they were to me, everybody had something that they needed to work on.
Right.
Everybody did. I don't care. No one's perfect.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I mean, some of these players are going to do what these players do, Right. So it's for me, and it didn't matter if it was female, male, it doesn't matter, Sure. It really doesn't matter to me. I don't do this with males and I don't do this with females. It's if it's appropriate, Sure. Then this is what we're going to do. Right. But yeah, I think a lot of the egos and all that, I didn't really have to deal with much of that. I think the coaching staff does a pretty good job of putting that at bay. At least they did. But yeah, so we just, I know this is going to be boring, but we just came in and we just trained and and then, after we talk, what can we do different? What do you need? And because again, you had 12 kids most of the time. It wasn't like we had these huge rosters. So, I mean, God, I knew more than I wanted to know about these guys.
Sure. Yeah. It's a small group.
Yeah. So, and that's your only responsibility. Yeah. I should know everything about them. I should know when they have class. I should know what they're having for breakfast.
Sure.
So a lot of the X's and O's of the weightlifting part wasn't even part of our conversation. We just did it. And they trusted the fact that what they were doing was what they needed to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's different. It's so different. Like now that I have a bigger team, a team of 30, it's overwhelming for me. Still not used to it. But and I can't have those relationships that I had when I had a team of 12, so, I'd like to, but I think it's pretty hard, it'd be really hard to do that. But yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but things are different. I think you got to take everybody individually. For sure. What motivates them? How do they, what makes them work,
Yeah.
And you know what, I've tried many things like with that team and with the schedule we had, whether it be practice schedule or with class schedule, many times where, hey, we don't need to lift as a group. Let's take, and we'll lift between 8 and noon. We come in, we'll talk about things, more personal training, small group training with those guys to get it done before practice. And that was successful with some groups, and some groups it wasn't. Some groups wanted to be together. Because we needed maybe some other intangibles we needed to work on. But it was very few. I never went up to the coaches and was like, hey, we're squatting this, because that wasn't it. It was more about the relationships, more about how they work together.
Big picture stuff. And so as you like started to go through, right? Like, so it's like, say you're in the year, like, I don't know, like 7 or 8, right? And you've got, national championship or 2, right? You've, I don't know how many Final Four appearances you guys had. Was there a point in time where things started to change a little bit in terms of like your approach? Like, did it get better? Did it get different? Right? Like, I'm not really sure, like, if you know what I mean, if there's some like did things change as far as like some of the problems you had and things you needed to come across, specifically when it came to like, I'm imagining, right? Like, as things started to progress through and you're like, all right, like, every year we kind of need to plan to like, we're going to be going deep into the season. Like, we're probably going to be in the Final Four, and we're going to, we're going to be traveling, and we're going to be, down in some city for like a couple weeks or whatever the case is. Right. And like, so I guess like a 2-part question, like, did things change at all as far as like, as you started to realize like, hey, like I'm I'm part of something very successful here now. And I've established myself as someone who's, an integral part of this program. And then, like how did that kind of like fit into like some of the things that you guys would do on a daily basis?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously as you, as any profession, you get more confident as you go, as
Sure.
you're in and you're successful and you're doing good things, but things were always changing. I mean, God, we were in the Big East for a couple of years, then we switched to the American Conference, and then the travel just got nuts. Every trip was a plane trip. So you're always adapting, trying to find loopholes. Like, hey, if we go to Memphis, which hotel are we staying at? Okay, let me go ahead of time and look at, what facilities do we have to work out in?
Sure.
Looking at, hey, where are we eating? Because I help with the meal planning and all that type of stuff, and trying to do all this beforehand, trying to make it so it's as seamless as possible. When you get there, because the last thing you want to do is upset the the flow or the our plan, that our director of ops is very good at that. But what was the second part of that question again?
It's all good. It's a Friday end of the week. Yeah, just to kind of like if there was anything that you felt like, all right, like I don't know if it's almost like, all right, we're successful, and like if there's like a kind of like an eye-opening moment, it's like, okay, this is like year 7 or 8. It's like things are going pretty well, like or in the Final Four every year, right? Like people are looking at like, did you feel the need, like anything change as far as like your approach, things you needed to do better, things that you kind of felt like, or did things was there like a tipping point where there was like, because I'm assuming like despite the success, you're behind, like, I mean, even some of the most like successful companies in the world are completely chaotic and dysfunctional behind the scenes. And that's not to say that UConn women's basketball was, right. But like, obviously you're dealing with the ebbs and flows of everything that we've been talking about, right? All of the different variables. So like, I'm wondering if there was a point in time where some of those things were better or worse in some of the ways you navigated those situations. Yeah.
No, I mean, honestly, I think once you get into it, as far as, a few years in, it just, the expectation is the same. We're really good at what we do. And we just need to keep it that way. And every time you have a chance to reflect back on, a season or a conversation or, every year I remember sitting back, and every April, whether we won it all or lost in the Final Four,
Sure.
God, and you have a little notebook and you just keep notes throughout the year. Like, hey, let's see if I can address this next year. Or when we go to this place, let's address this. You know what I mean? Because you get to the point where you're like a well-oiled machine, but yet you don't want to get stagnant.
Right.
So you kind of want to cause a little disruption especially when things didn't go so smoothly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, for the most part, it's just sitting back. And again, this program had enough staff and everybody did their jobs. It's like, I remember Coach Oriama, the first time I had a meeting with him, and Coach Martin was in the room too. And Coach Martin's like, this is your strength coach. And he was basically like, you know what? I'm an expert at what I do. You're an expert at what you do. And this is how we roll, So again, it was like, we were one program, but we this very distinct and separate, lines that are drawn. Like he didn't come down and tell me how to do my job, and I certainly didn't go up there and tell him how to do his job.
So it wasn't you drawing up those plays that led to
it was all me. But yeah, so it's just one of those things where it was nice to have these boundaries, but sometimes it was a little uncomfortable to try to cross those a little bit, but yeah, so it's sometimes hard to reflect back on, because that's all you knew. It's all I knew, like, this is my life. Like this is for, most of the year,
a large part of your year for a long part of your life, right? Like it was, over a decade, right? And obviously most of your year is spent with this team.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I said, they are, a well-oiled machine. So you just got to get in there and look for opportunities to make it better.
Yeah.
And be around. And
no, you go. Sorry, you go.
I mean, I found that for me, and especially, and I think I learned a lot even last year when we were in this 22-day bubble with everybody, that was difficult, but like, you go from where I started with this program, with being there, 2 hours a week, trying to like, can I have 10 minutes for a warm up, to slowly evolving, plucking away, chipping at the rock, And again, people are like, why are you chipping at the rock? The rock is like you win championships every year. I'm like, I know, but you don't know. We can do things better to help these athletes.
Right.
We can do things better.
Are we winning because of what we're doing, or are we winning in spite of what we're doing? Right. Like this. Yeah. This like it's a question I think most programs kind of need to keep themselves in check regardless of the success, or especially when you're having success, right?
Or the competition hasn't caught up yet. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, so in my progression, it'd be probably easier to talk about if I was there a couple of years,
Sure.
But for me, it was like 14, 15 years,
Yeah.
Of every year starting in, August going till April.
Yeah.
Every year. And so it's all a big convoluted mess, but I just remember, I always keep coming back to, what can we do differently? What can we do to make it better? And like I said, a lot of it was trying to find, loopholes within the schedule where I can get my hands on these guys, I can get some more buy-in. I can, and a lot of times the weight room was just like it wasn't a stressful place to be because, it's the practice in games is very stressful. The coaches obviously expect a very high level.
Sure.
And for me, it was more of like, I'm going to try to do a little bit of the opposite of what those guys do because we need some balance here.
Yeah.
If they're going to go out and run them up and down the practice court for 3 hours, I'm not going to do that.
3 hours.
Well, you know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, it's funny because probably not joking, are you? Right? Like, it's like, there's like legitimately like some of these practices are that long. So yeah. I get it. I think, well, and I don't want to make this all about, UConn women's basketball, because I do want to get into some of the other stuff that you have, but this is interesting. Like, and I think it's important that we obviously outline some of the, like you said, just like some of the ways that you approach such a large part of your life, for a long part of your life, a large part of your year, such a successful program, right? Stepping in when it was already successful, but finding different ways to, create and intervene a little bit and, come up with some solutions to provide value. Like, all those things are incredible. I think, and like I said, like when it goes back to that conversation I had with you initially, I was like, yeah, like I'm sure there were some really cool things you did from a training perspective, but what I was more so, really engaged with was like, wow, I'm talking to somebody who probably had to navigate a ton of different scenarios, a ton of different, spontaneous situations that just arose throughout the, over a decade that you were with the program, right? And dealing with all these personalities and the success, right? Like, the more success you have, probably the more, I guess in my thought process, and maybe like, oh, the more challenging things would get. But as far as like the relationship, obviously, and what kind of, I want to come back to some of the like crossing boundary stuff as we start to talk about a little bit more of like what you're doing now with some of your teams and how you're kind of utilizing this holistic and reintegrative sport performance title to, go through some things. But yeah, so if you want to kind of talk us through like how the transition out of UConn women's basketball happened and how that kind of that chapter in your life came to an end.
Yeah. Make a long story short, we ended up getting back from the bubble and, we had a couple downtime. One of the assistant coaches, who was my liaison, she had taken a job, somewhere else. And, I slowly, we don't have to get into the nooks and crannies of it, but basically it was one of those things where, because I'm work at UConn, I've been here so long, I'm part of a union. They just transitioned me over to, Olympic sports.
Yeah.
And they found someone else to work women's basketball.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a little bit of a like, whoa, okay. And I did obviously nothing wrong. It was just mainly just a decision that was made and, and that's life,
Yeah.
But yeah, so, moving over to Olympic sports, with my background and with looking at, cause I had many talks with, our director of Olympic sports, Mo Butler, and, kind of like, hey, where do I fit in over here?
Right.
What is this? I don't want to be, part of a crew that doesn't need me. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Because, I can move on. That's fine. I can move on, but you know what? It ends up working out pretty well, where I'm able to, in this new role, working on with the athletic trainers and medical staff,
Sure.
trying to figure out a way to have a better assessment, better return to play protocols. Again, this is a huge undertaking.
Sure.
Huge undertaking. I didn't realize how huge it was until now I'm in it. Like,
yeah,
right now,
that's a vital piece there.
It's huge. And you know what? And I think that's kind of a missing piece in college athletics. We need to do better, because you know what? Yeah. You hope that your athletes, don't get hurt. And you know what? I think we can help that if we do a better assessment other than, hey, your heart beats, let's go.
Yeah.
I think that we can do a better job with all the stuff. And I'm talking, everything from using our technology, and movement screening and whatever. There's so many things out there. You just got to be able to figure out what it is you like, what works, what's going to work within the program, what's going to be efficient, quick, reliable, measurable, and trying to figure that out mostly, globally for your department. And that's tough because, and per sport, because not every sport needs this kind of assessment.
Sure. Yeah.
So that, and then, working on return to play. So at some point, and every athletic trainer is different, right? With how they rehab somebody and when they allow them to come back and whatnot. So a lot of it's just trying to form relationships with athletic trainers that I didn't, have relationships with prior, because I was in my own little fortress over in basketball.
Yeah.
We didn't get out much, just like, how it is in football. You don't get out much.
Right. Yeah.
So it's been fun. It's been challenging.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to be heading in the right direction. It's
Right.
just, again, we're also impatient right now. We're also impatient in life in general. We expect everything to happen like quick.
Right.
And
college sports is generally an impatient industry, right? Not that everyone's fault. It's just the way it is, right? Like there's always something needs to happen right now. What's the quick fix, right? And I think that kind of puts us in positions where we undercut certain things, right? Like talking about something that's super important, right? Like you found ways to obviously, and that's kind of my next question is like, earlier part we talked about like not crossing boundaries. Everybody kind of knows what they need to do as far as what their specialization is, but now I'm wondering if your perspective has changed a little bit because of the fact that you're able to take some of this, life and massage therapy, the current role that you're in, some of all your understanding about like sports science, data, obviously everything that you've experienced through just being a strength and conditioning coach in general. Has that kind of changed a little bit the lens that you look through now as you're dealing with sports medicine staff, and then obviously trying to talk with sport coaches? If you want to just kind of elaborate on that and maybe talk us through some of the systems that you guys are coming up with, or whatever you're allowed to kind of fill us in on.
Yeah. No, and we're not like rocket scientists over here. We're just
you're working for NASA.
Nothing crazy. Yeah, working with Secret Service over here. But I think in this new role, I'm able to sit back and look at it, like I said, through a different lens. I'm able to sit back and kind of, spread my wings out a little bit and dip into different pots that I wasn't able to dip in before. Sure. Able to expand the massage therapy program here, which has been huge. And the athletes and the coaches and administration has come around to like, hey, this is a crucial part of our recovery process to our athletes recovering and going to play,
nice
at their best. So, but anyways, but yeah, so it's nice to be able to, cause you can have tunnel vision, when you're writing programs and when you're just, training all the time. Now with us using a bunch of, technology and all that, and my communication with the coaches is different. They're just different people.
Yeah, sure.
And it's been really, really refreshing to be able to have a conversation about, technology and player load per minute and
sure,
whatever, anything that we're talking about, and have it be like, yeah, I want to learn more about this.
Right.
Like, so it's it's a two-way street. It's nice. It's nice to be on the same path, and we're all just trying to get better. We're all just trying to learn. There's no egos. There's no, this is my way. This is it. We're pretty much all learning. And we're every day we're literally like, especially with me and the soccer staff, like, hey, I just talked to somebody about the question you asked me yesterday, and I think this might be good. Yeah, let's talk about it. Like, there's nothing off limits. We're all
that's fun.
It's fun, and it's a different world. It's a really different world for me when it comes to that perspective, because I didn't necessarily have that. Because like I said, with basketball, these people have been here forever. They do what they do.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to veer them off their track. And it's refreshing to have a head coach and assistant coaches and whatever that are like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's take time and meet. Let's collaborate. What are your thoughts on this practice load and this practice plan?
Sure.
And then, I can bring my experiences from basketball, because honestly, I don't know anything about soccer. Nothing. And I've learned so much of these last 9 months,
Yeah.
and just being open and honest and be like, guys, I don't understand. Like just last week, I was like, hey, what's a 6?
Yeah.
Like you have your positions and their numbers. Like, can you go over this with me? And they're like, sure, sit down. I don't know.
Awesome.
It's I can take a deep breath,
Yeah.
and try to absorb and understand. And it motivates me to want to like dig deeper in this,
Sure. Yeah. That's awesome.
But yeah. And then the whole, like, the other side of this job is not just training soccer,
Sure.
the other half in golf, the other half is, really trying to figure out how we keep these athletes safe, and when they do get hurt, how are we going to get them back as quick as possible and safely, and make sure we're doing the right things, across the board. Because you know what, our staff we're from people fresh out of school to people like Chris West, have been doing this for 25 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And everyone in between, and we all have different backgrounds. So, how I go about a ACL post 6 months might be different from the way someone else is doing it.
Yeah.
So sure. A lot of my time right now I'm spending is research, talking to PTs. My dog's just barking. Talking to, people about, hey, and again, there's no like cookie cutter program for this. Like even at UConn, we have all these great athletic trainers, and they all do it 13 different ways.
Yeah.
So it's just finding this happy medium and trying to share with the staff, like, you know what, I like this model. What do you guys think?
Sure.
I just talked to the guy from Bald, and he put me onto this control chaos continuum, this whole theory. And I think it's great. I love it. It puts everything in a nice little box, and
what is that? I've never heard of that.
It's like a return to run program.
Oh.
It's super simple. It's like five segments where it starts from like really controlled, like, hey, we just tore our ACL. All right. It's really controlled. We're in the training room. We're literally just standing on one leg, to moderate, to, moderate chaos. We're now after like 6-9 months, we're now out, playing. My dog keeps barking. Can you hear it?
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah. And now he barks at everything, probably a squirrel.
Yeah. I think he agrees with everything we're talking about here. We should have him on the podcast. Yeah.
But yeah, so then it goes to like chaos, which is like out there playing. So that, like, again, you can, depending on when you get your student athlete that's been injured, like some athletic trainers say, you know what, day after surgery, come in, let's go. Let's work the uninvolved limb. Let's go. Sure. And some trainers are like, nope, I want to keep them. And that's fine, whatever, but at least you have a starting point. And, we started with yielding ISOs, or we starting with, what do we, so it's kind of just putting, I don't want to put anybody in a box on our staff. You have to do this program, but just more of anything, like, here's some ideas. So if you are dealing with a labral or any sort of like injury like this that has surgery or not, this is going to give you kind of a starting point. And then from there, it's really all about the athlete's progress.
Sure.
So it's really hard to come up with something that works for everybody. So I'm just kind of trying to navigate that.
Yeah.
I'm not real smart, so I'm reaching out to everybody to figure out, like,
you're
doing this right.
Yeah, obviously you're super creative. I think it's funny because it's like, I know we were joking about like the title of that you have now, right? Director of Holistic and Reintegrative Sport Performance. And you were saying like you might be the only person who has like that role, right? But I think it could be a vital role. Like, I think we have these roles where it's like, okay, well, you're going to oversee like some, we were talking last night with Sean. I was like, yeah, well, some of these strength coaches will then move into administrative roles, and sometimes sport coaches do the same. And then we have these like high performance directors now where they kind of like oversee, the whole department, all that kind of stuff. And that's cool. But I think your position, and just thinking out loud now, it's like, this is a vital position, right? We're talking about like overseeing some specific systems that are going to be integrated within. And obviously it seems like, I asked like, okay, like what kind of systems have you guys come up with? But the reality is, like you said, like there's no specific systems that you can just have, right? You need to have you could come up with a new one tomorrow based off of whatever problem you come across, right? So I think that's really interesting, and it's really important. And I think it's really important that you're in that role, because like I said, as we outlined through your experience, you've slowly, gradually come from, your lens has changed, and it's graduated from like, okay, this is me, I'm gonna stay in my lane, I'm gonna do what I can do to make sure that I don't get in the way, to, hey, I've got to use some of my skills and my abilities, which obviously you have a ton of, to try to, create provide a different perspective to these, athletic trainers and some of the sports medicine staff that I may be working with, some of the coaches, some of the players. Right. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on that, I mean, obviously I completely agree. Like, I think this is a really interesting position. I think it's really important. We probably should do like a part 2 where we get into like some of the ways that you can actually approach a position like this. Cause who knows, maybe there are positions like this being created elsewhere and people are starting to take on these roles people are starting to take on these roles. So I think it's like, but yeah, I don't know if there's, any specific thoughts you have on some like interesting things that you've come across, during this process and kind of, some of the ways that you've attacked some of these things.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, you've the whole like sitting down and, when I was transitioning over to Olympic sports, like, hey, what are you good at? Trying to even figure out a title, like sitting down, trying to make up a title, and we kept coming back to, when you hear it a lot, like bridging the gap between athletic training and sports performance,
Sure.
And that's kind of where it all started, from is just like, and you hear it all the time, and people say it, but are we actually doing it?
Yeah.
So that's where this kind of came about. And it's one of those things that, it needs to marinate. You need to develop relationships. You need to develop trust, more importantly, with the people that you're working with. And that takes a lot of time. So for me to sit down at my computer and write up, here's a program for somebody with an injured arm. That's, I could do that, and just hand it out to whoever, oh, you got a shoulder kit here, use this. Yeah. No, it's bigger than that. Sure. And I've racked my brain trying to figure out a system. And you know what? There just isn't. There just isn't one. So we're literally, and I've made calls and I've talked to our PTs and they're probably, I'm going to lean into them a lot.
Yeah.
Because they live this world every day. And a part of it is me learning about their process of, hey, when someone is injured, this is the steps that we do, learning their world. Sure. Just like they want to learn our world.
Yeah.
So it's going to take some time. And I don't know if, it's this baby steps at a time.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, not to cut you off, but just so you know, or just so the listeners know, so like that would be kind of like the process, I guess, right? Like, so you have, athlete A or player 1 gets injured, right? They are, maybe it's like right in that initial phases, right? It's just kind of like protect, maybe they're post-surgery, whatever the case is, right? So like, is that kind of how the process goes where it's like, all right, for your particular role, it's like, all right, now I'm going to go talk with whoever it may be, right? Like whoever the athletic trainer is for that particular athlete. Maybe you're going to talk to their PT, or are you talking to the doctor as well? Like, is that kind of like, your role is kind of like gain info,
Yeah. I'm just trying to gain info any way I can, within the boundaries. I'm not going to be, again, like because of our proximity.
Sure.
Like it's hard for me to get over to the field house to talk to Patty, about a track kid. Again, I don't even know. Right now I'm starting small. I'm working with literally my athletic trainer and my team to navigate through, one certain instance. You know what I mean?
And you can make the argument that you should have like a team of like 10 people for that role. You know what I mean?
Well, what? Maybe it'll evolve into that, or maybe it'll evolve into our actual strength coaches playing a more vital role in the return to play process. Because right now, the return to play process is based off of when the trainer gives them back to you.
Sure. Yeah.
When the athletic trainer gives back to you, and every, like I said, everyone's different. So that's where I always run, and I'm like, yeah, I like this idea. I'm going to run with it. Then every time, that's not going to work for everybody.
Do you think some of the old, like the typical ways of just like, at least in my experience, I found that a lot of athletic trainers stuck to solely this like protocol based return to play, where it was like, okay, well, regardless of the athlete, it was more like, we know, X amount of weeks post-surgery, the tissue is supposed to be here and they are now prepared to go out and do this. And it's like, I always thought that was super reductionist, because in my mind, I'm thinking like you just alluded to, like they're a completely different complex system in itself, right? And trying to figure out some of those. So like, is that kind of the lens you take through? It's like, I don't really care how many weeks or what this like protocol in this book that was written 30 years ago says, right? Like I need to be creative. I need to attack it at the, solve the problem at the level at which it exists, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously with some injuries, there's nothing to do but wait.
Right.
Because it's a bone problem. You gotta let it heal. It needs time. Everything needs time, depending on, God, I've learned so much. I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize that this was, obviously like, it's a big deal, and even the surgeon or how they did the surgery plays into how you return to play,
Sure.
and I feel like I'm not even close to being any close to being an expert to even talk about this. You know what I mean? But I'm navigating my way through it. And, you know, everybody, you know, like we had a couple ACL kids on the soccer team. You know what?
Sure.
This is like my like litmus test. Like this is what I'm writing down, everything that we're doing. You know, we're on the force plates doing our ISO, I'm doing ISO mid thigh pulls. We're doing ISO, you know, quarter squats. I'm just messing around with them and they're having a good time doing it. You know, and we're seeing where they are, you know, I'm just tracking everything so that I can, at least I'll have a really good idea, hopefully by the end of this, you know, when they return to play, return to performance.
Sure.
In these two cases.
Yeah.
I could have another one where they have a different surgery and a you know, it's overwhelming, but you know, I'm trying not to like simplify because it's not a simple process at all.
It's not. And
it's brilliant and they're smart and they do what they do to protect the athlete and get them back as quick as they can. And I'm just trying to lend a hand when I can.
Sure. Yeah.
And if we can get the athletic trainers in on our force plates, you know, that's one of the big things that I want to do is I want to try to integrate. I want them to be able to come in. Hey, I want to test this kid on the plate and we can talk a similar language.
Yeah.
You know, because right now I feel like, and it might be UConn, it might be everywhere, but there's like athletic training, strength and conditioning. And, you know, I think we can do better. I think everybody can do better.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, God, the athletic training room is right across the hall, you know,
right across the hall.
Right across the hall. You know what I mean? So let's talk about, but then again, everyone's running around with their hair on fire.
Right. I don't know.
It's like we are overwhelmed with the amount of work and the amount of expectations that we have.
Right.
You know? So
and unfortunately,
it's hard to have a conversation.
Yeah. The student athlete suffers, right? Because it's like the platform that's been provided. It's like, all right, well, we need like all the things that you're mentioning are super important, right? We talked about how creative that you need to be in your situation. And I think, and it is really complex. And that's why now that I'm just kind of like thinking through this, I'm like, we need to do a part 2. That's why I just wrote down. We can kind of discuss some of these specific, maybe like, you know, a couple months down the road, as you like get more into some of the stuff, you come across some more scenarios or whatever. And we can kind of like outline some specific scenarios, some of the ways that you guys attacked it, some of the solutions that you provided, the lens that you look through, the filtering process, all that stuff, and some of the LMT stuff. So we'll definitely have to do a part 2, but I do think that it is really complex. And that's why I think, you know, it's important that there's a role like yours, obviously, that exists. I do think, though, what I've come to learn is that regardless of how good the systems are and some of the people that you put in place, if the platform to succeed for those people is not provided, it almost doesn't matter. Like the depth of the people who are, you know, in those positions. And obviously you're someone who has a super deep knowledge of these things. And obviously you really care. Like you're going to try to find the answers, which is all anyone can really ask for, given, you know, the medium that we work through, which is the human body. So I think, but, you know, I think, it's like everyone's running around trying to get things done. And it just, obviously it doesn't take a rocket science to understand that the more work that's piled on, the less quality is going to be put out there. Right. So it's I think, you know,
and a lot of these athletes come in and they just want like 2 minutes of your time. So just like stop, take 2 minutes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's it. And that's something that was easier for me to do when I had a roster of 12.
Sure.
You know?
But
you know, we're always trying to, you know, for me, as I'm getting older, having kids of my own, you know, I think that the being able to admit that you're wrong, being able to be flexible, being able to say, hey, I can learn from you.
Yeah.
And I know you're 18 years old, but I can learn from you, especially when it comes to me with soccer. I'm like, hey, what are you doing out there? I don't know, what position do you play? Like simple stuff. Like, and they love, and it's nice. It's like, we have this respect for each other that we may not have never had, because I'm walking into the situation where you guys have to teach me too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's more of a balanced situation where it's like, I'm in charge. I'm gonna do my job, you know, and you're gonna, you know, do what you have to do. But it's definitely, you know, something where I think we're all just a little bit more vulnerable.
Yeah. That's
good.
good.
And we're not afraid to ask for help.
Right. Yeah. And it's amazing. Everybody, sorry, you go.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I think that's been a big change for me is, you know, being like, hey, I feel comfortable enough to ask you for help.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where you didn't always have that before.
Yeah. Imagine that. Like, and I used to do it all the time. I feel like, why can't coaches just ask athletes for some of the answers sometimes? Like, I mean, it's their body. They're the ones that are, you know what I mean? It's just like,
I tell them athletes all the time. I'm like, how old are you? They're like, I'm 19. I'm like, you've lived in your body for 19 years. What makes you think I know it better than you?
Yeah. Talk to me. Tell me what
Let's
I need
talk
to know.
about it. Yeah. And it's usually something really simple, really easy to fix.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we were running the other day with soccer, and one girl just likes to swim. When she, those runners that swim.
Yeah.
She sprints. She's well, can we fix it? I'm like, we can work on it, but how old are you? And she was 19. I'm like, you've been probably doing that for 18 years since you started walking.
Yeah.
But hey, we can, let's work on it. Let's try, So just kind of like, I don't want to set the expectations where, oh, we're going to make everything perfect. You're going to be a world-class sprinter. No, it's not going to happen, but we're going to address it. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to do our best, both of us together.
Yeah. Athletes have an amazing way of simplifying some of the things that us strength coaches, create such complexities in our mind about, it's like, it's amazing when you talk to an athlete and they give you this answer and you're like, yeah, that's probably the way I should have been looking at it the whole time. It's really that simple, but
keep it simple, stupid, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I have to keep telling myself when I'm knee deep in all these articles, these research articles about return to play. And I'm like, oh my God, it's too much. So I just got to keep it simple. Just do what you know.
Keep it simple.
Ask for help.
Yeah.
Ask for help. That's all.
Well, this is awesome. This has been great. Fortunately, we're coming up on about an hour. So what I want to do, we're definitely going to have to get you back for a part 2 if you're up for that. I would really appreciate that. But this has been great. And I think it was important to obviously spend some time outlining what it's like for someone like you, who's obviously had a vast, array of experiences and situations, and how you've kind of progressed through all of those experiences, and what that looks like on the back end now, in your years where you're able to actually put more, have more value and provide more value based off some of the things that, deep down inside. And I think this has been great. So I know, before you leave, if you have any sort of like resources, any work that you've done that you want other people to check out, that you can let them know where they can find it, any resources that you think are valuable, that you want to put out there. I usually try to like tell people just to get, expand the libraries of the listeners kind of thing. So any work, any presentations that you've done that you want to, people to check out or whatever, whether it be on massage therapy or any of the other concepts that we talked about today, and any other resources in general that you just think are interesting that people should check out.
Yeah. As Ant and I were talking about before we got on this, I'm really not into social media or anything.
Right.
Or LinkedIn or anything like that. I don't know. I think I missed the boat on that. I'm maybe a little bit too old to be jumping in on all this stuff, but
you're not missing much.
Yeah. But no, honestly, like, I had a feeling that you'd be asking me this question about, who I turn to or what books or what podcasts I listen to. And you know what? These days, because I walked into a situation that I was like, whoa, okay, everything's like starting from scratch, brand new, So for me, I feel like, I'm reading anything soccer I can get my hands on, anything about, I can't even pronounce the guy's name, the hit builder guy. It's complimentary training. I'm looking into his stuff a lot.
Oh, Mladen Jovanovic.
Yeah. How do you say it again? Yeah.
I don't go by me. I'm pretty sure it's Mladen Jovanovic, but there's probably some.
Yeah, I think you even put me onto him. But a lot of my knowledge I'm getting is him like, hey, talking to my soccer coach or somebody like, hey, I need some information. Who do I talk to? And then I get their number and I call them.
Yeah.
And then I talk to them and then I find someone else to talk to.
Yeah.
So I'm not just sitting there. I just can't sit here and on nothing against podcasts, but I've got a 3-year-old and a middle schooler. I don't have time, to sit and listen to a lot. I just have to get on the phone with people and get the goods that way because
get it done. I need answers. I need them now.
Yeah. And you know what? I can lay in bed at night and read a book and it's going to be about 5 minutes and it's on my face.
Right.
From sleeping. Yeah. So it's one of those things where I know where my life is. And I know that the best way for me to get information is to reach out to people.
Yeah. That's a great answer. That's a great answer.
So it's really simple and maybe old school, but talking to people on the phone is I feel like it's a dying thing.
Yeah, right. It's a dying art. It's like you want to get some information, call someone. I'm sure they'll pick up the phone. It's like,
I know, and you can actually leave a message, and maybe they'll call you back.
Unless it comes up as like spam risk on the phone or whatever it is, you should be all right. Yeah, leave a message, and like you said, if they want to help out, they'll call you back. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. This is awesome. I really appreciate this. Definitely got to have you on again. Yeah. So if you're good with that, we'll kind of end it there. I think we're up about an hour now. So
Okay.
thank you again for this information. This is really great. And I'm really happy that everybody got exposure to somebody like yourself who has the lens that you have and be able to provide some of that information for us. So thank you again. Have a great weekend. And to everybody else, goodbye.